Hey parents, Mr. Lacefield here with some homework help from day three. And so with that, it looks like there's some pretty interesting things in day three. They want you to draw words first off, and so it gives you just the example of like moon and drawing moon and stuff. But I thought it'd be really cool to do the abstract part of this assignment and think about like what would um, love or beauty or precious or things like that be, just as you're trying to challenge yourself to think abstractly about those different words and what they might mean. I thought that'd be a cool thing to do with that. Math I felt like was really good, so it's still applying the digits 1 through 9, but it's wanting you to make equivalent fractions. My daughter and I, when we did this activity, we were doing equivalent fractions, but we were just looking at taking those 2D shapes and breaking them down into equal parts. The big thing to know about equivalent fractions is that they are equal parts. And so I did some examples up here at the top where I took equivalent fractions. And so you have like 1/2 is the same as 2/4 is the same as 4/8. And then showing that, kind of applying where she was with that. So this is a half, this is 2 out of 4, this is 4 out of 8. But again, noticing what's shaded it in tells you it's still the same amount. You're still equivalent, you have the same amount of that. And so then another example, I did 1/2, 3, 6, and 6/12. One thing that we talked about with equivalent fractions in math, as I was helping some math students when you guys were doing fractions, was the fact that whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom to make it equivalent. So even if I didn't have something like a half and making all these a half, like if I had something like 3/4, well, if I multiply both the numerator and denominator by 2, then I'm going to have an equivalent fraction, 6/8. Same thing, if I continue to multiply it by 2, I'm going to end up with 12/16. So all these would also be equivalent fractions. So the big thing with equivalent fractions is just remembering that it's showing how those fractions are equal. That of course builds upon, and you'll be able to do, looking at your denominators, the lowest common denominator, you'll be able to take those fractions and get them in their simplest form. And so this is just a good remembering, fractions and equivalent fractions and how they work, and what to do with the numerator and denominator. So good activity to practice. And then for science, I felt like this was a great one. We just taught this unit not too long ago with our Amplify Science, looking at simple systems and making sure that we understand that there are different types of energy sources. And then with those energy sources, you have to be able to have something that transfers that energy so that we can use it in our everyday life. For example, we had talked about it starts off as a source, and then you have to have some sort of source converter that will convert that source into actual energy that can be used. Then wires will be involved in transferring that energy to another energy converter that will convert that energy into a usable form. So just to use an example, today I ate lunch and I microwaved my lunch. So the microwave was actually an energy converter, and it was converting electrical energy from the wires into heat. And so that's what was able to heat up my food. Now, if you were to trace that back, those wires, run into my house, and then they come from the power lines. And actually, I have KU utilities, and so I did just a brief research and found out that there is the E.W. Brown generation um, that's in Harrodsburg. And they specifically use coal, natural gas, solar, and hydropower. So they convert motion energy from the water using a hydroelectric plant. And so that would be your source converter, source being you have your movement or motion energy, and then using that motion to create that into electrical energy that's transferred out. Your coal, where you're going to be burning that coal, and then you have to have, of course, the appropriate source converter to create or to turn that heat into electrical energy, which of course they have with the plant, their power plant there. But same thing with natural gas and those other things. So again, what I'd like for kids to do, I think it'd be really cool, is just to find a device in their house and then to kind of write down what the simple system would be, or what the system would be to actually run that. And then make sure you're mentioning what type of energy. So another example could be I opened up a can of fruits today, and so I had to use a can opener, which is going to, it's a energy converter, which is converting electrical energy into motion energy, so that way it can cut open the can. And then, of course, you trace that back to the electrical energy is running through, and eventually to the power plant. And then possibly could be eventually the source could have been solar because they have solar power, or solar panels, coal, natural gas, or hydro. I'm not for sure which one specifically, if they use a mixture of all of those in their process. But I thought it was a neat connection to something that we had already learned, and something that'd be really cool for kids to draw out that system and how it works, listing the type of energy that's produced. So, and in art, it says express your thoughts and ideas to an audience by creating your own comic book. I feel like that's a really fun thing to do. When you think of comic books, you always think of superheroes. So I thought it'd be fun for students to create their own superhero with their own powers, and then to do a simple story arc with that superhero, which could be introduction of superhero, how he got his powers, introduction of villain, and then how, of course, the superhero defeats the villain and then saves the day in the end. Or, of course, you can do any variations of that. But comic book, I thought, was a neat way to have kids draw and illustrate. I remember comic books also have conversation bubbles that'll be popping up so you can see what the different characters are saying. So don't forget to put those in there so you can see the conversation between your different characters in the comic book. But that's it for day 4, and kind of talk through some of those things. As always, message me on Dojo if you guys have any questions. Be happy to go over that and talk some more. Yeah, so have a good rest of your day.